Hey guys, it's Sleepy Reader at the park. I've just finished reading Collider #1 and Collider FBP #2. Some kind of fun science fiction comic books. And it's got references to the strong forces and the weak forces of physics and brains. BRANES from string theory, and it combines that nicely with the physics of the universe, or the local physics of Earth falling apart, and a bureau that investigates and fixes those physics problems. So it weaves in the science fiction with kind of police procedural-ish stuff, workplace issues, and probably is going to spin out into a bigger science fiction picture as it moves along. I enjoyed reading these first 2 issues quite a bit. And I was just thinking about how much good science fiction there is. Here in the back is the advertisements and promotional material for Trillium, another science fiction series. The Wake by Scott Snyder, which I haven't read, sounds like it's science fiction mixed with horror. Seems like there's tons of science fiction-ish stuff coming out from Image along with everyone else, but I particularly noticed it in Image, like Nowhere Men and now I'm drawing a blank. But you guys probably get the idea. There's Prophet, and there was all kinds of things. Anyway, sometimes it seems like a good idea to do a video out in the open, and other times it's kind of distracting. If I'd done it at home and I'd pile up a whole bunch of science fiction comics in front of me. But so, superhero comic books have been tied to science fiction from the very beginning. Superman, the first superhero, was from another planet. He was an alien. And there was sort of a science fiction-y explanation of his powers, at least till he got so powerful that it's just a miracle. But when it was more like he's from a different planet with a different sun, when he was super strong and super fast, you could kind of buy that as being a realistic science fictional premise. There's, the old science fiction books by Edgar Rice Burroughs of John Carter on Mars. He's like a Superman on Mars because of the lighter gravity. And Superman was kind of that kind of thing at first. And it seems like science fiction has been intertwined with comics ever since. In the 50s, the great EC comics would blatantly steal stories from the science fiction pulps, like Ray Bradbury stories and other things. And when they weren't stealing, they were definitely adapting the feel and the idea of the short stories from the 40s and 50s with little twists on them and the like. And I know that Jack Kirby was very influenced by science fiction pulps, and he brought a whole sense of wonder, kind of cosmic thing to comic books, starting, it seems, with the Silver Surfer and Galactus. Maybe he did it before then and I just don't know about it. And Thor, Jack Kirby, Stan Lee's version of Thor, spun out in kind of a mix of mythology and cosmic science fiction, with Thor meeting people like Galactus too, and alien empires like the Rigelians. And with the Fantastic Four, they got their powers through kind of a science fictional thing, and even Spider-Man. So the Marvel Universe always felt very science fictional to me. But science fiction and comics always seem to be second bananas to written science fiction and then later to movies. Once Star Wars came out, the science fiction and comics was always, imitating Star Wars, like Chris Claremont's science fiction backgrounds and stuff in the X-Men always had kind of a Star Wars feel to it, which was totally cool. I liked it a lot. But science fiction and comics seem to be more the kids' version of science fiction, not the grown-up science fiction, to me. And I shortly after starting to read comics, I started to read science fiction, I think starting with Edgar Rice Burroughs, like I mentioned, with the John Carter of Mars. And, Isaac Asimov and Frank Herbert with Dune. And it seemed like there was so much really great, really amazing science fiction from the 40s, 50s, the 60s, the 70s had their share of really cool stuff. You got Robert Silverberg and Ursula Le Guin and Roger Zelazny and Philip Jose Farmer. And some of those people were selling millions of books, particularly Frank Herbert, but also Asimov and Philip Jose Farmer. You had Philip K. Dick out on the weird end of things, and he's sold a lot more since he died. But and into the 80s, I think you get Orson Scott Card and other good but kind of smaller writers. And by the 90s, science fiction in print seems to me, in my experience, to be fading out a bit. There's less big books out there, and there's less excitement generated, at least for me, and in the 2000s now, I just don't get that excited about print science fiction anymore. But I'm finding myself really excited by science fiction in comic books. And often I'll read a comic book and say, whoa, this, the people who are doing print science fiction, they should be looking at this. They should be seeing what's going on. I mean, you definitely see that with Saga or Prophet, Why the Last Man, and Brian K. Vaughan, he's a great science fiction writer. Why the Last Man, he's doing Saga. He's also got Private Eye, which is this really cool view of a near-future Earth where the internet and other things like that doesn't work anymore. And tons of things like Collider FBP. So, yeah, the science fiction guy in me is just really excited to be reading comic books again, along with the comic book guy in me, because there's so much really cool, original feeling comics. It's like comics, except for maybe Jack Kirby's Cosmic Thing, which, is part religion, part comic, part science fiction. Except for some of Jack Kirby's better stuff, most of the science fiction in comics used to feel borrowed from somewhere else, borrowed from books, like when you see directly ripped off science fiction stories, or more stuff in Marvel Comics or DC Comics that just was on loan, general ideas on loan from the pulps and the early science fiction writers. And, well, to backtrack a little bit, there was a close relationship between those pulps and the science fiction pulps and comics, because a lot of the writers came from there, and even some of the artists would do illustrations in the science fiction magazines and then work with comics, and then maybe go back to illustrating the covers of science fiction magazines or science fiction paperbacks. Sterenko has illustrated science fiction paperbacks. Frazetta, of course. Neil Adams. So there's a real intermingling there. Now maybe comics feel like they're going off on their own in terms of science fiction and aren't closely connected to the written science fiction world, such as it is. And it is kind of a world in and of itself, which I used to be quite involved with. But there's still, it feels like science fiction in comics is really growing up and really becoming organic to itself. It's like people are looking at comic books, especially people at Image and other indie places, perhaps now at Vertigo with Trillium and FBP, who are really building their science fiction from the inside out. Trillium has this great idea about this malignant, intelligent virus that's hunting mankind down across, interstellar reaches, and Collider takes, ideas about physics, I think directly from physics, and then translates them into a comic book medium rather than stealing them first from a science fiction writer. So, yeah, so it feels like science fiction and comics are really growing up, but there's an area, and maybe this is, most true in superhero comic books. In Trillium, there's some time travel involved, where two characters meet across time, and I assume we're going to get an explanation for that, because the foundations of everything seem to be really thought out by Jeff Lemire there. So I assume that we'll find out how that time travel works. It's being done by some aliens that the humans in the far future are encountering. So, and as I've said before, Trillium is really excellent, as I said elsewhere. I'm sorry for this. I'm more sort of almost talking in a panic being outdoors here. I don't know why. I've just gotten into that mode. Usually when I do an outdoor thing, there's no people around at all, but there are people in the distance walking by. Anyway, deep breath. So I'm kind of trusting that Jeff Lemire is going to do something interesting with his time travel. But if you look at a lot of comics that are otherwise really good comic books, like the all-new X-Men, Thor, Captain Marvel by Kelly Sue DeConnick, and I'll think of some others later, there's a lot of time travel. And the time travel just happens really easily. There's no real mechanism or explanation. Like in the all-new X-Men, where they bring the old X-Men back. How did they do that? Are there limits on this? Now, I haven't read it yet, and it'll probably be a while before I do read the, what is it called, The War of the Atom, where the future X-Men are going to get involved. So there'll be 3 versions of the X-Men. So maybe there'll be some explanation for time travel there. I know there's a lot of time travel in Ultron, and I don't know if there's any explanation there or rules of how time travel works. It's kind of the rules and the sense that there is a mechanism that you have to use that is important to me. So like in the all-new X-Men, you keep wondering, well, if Beast can just, like that, go back, grab some people from the past, why can't other people? Why can't someone go back and get Professor X? Why can't someone go back and stop Cyclops from killing Professor X? Like, if anyone can easily time travel, people would just be time traveling all the time. Things would be quite a mess. In Captain Marvel, at least in the issues I've read, like the first 7 issues or so, she does a whole bunch of time traveling. It just seems to happen by magic. Maybe she's holding some kind of metal that's causing her to time travel. That was referenced to a little bit. But yeah, it seems like it would be so easy to insert in there a mechanism, a way, a pattern, a sense of that there are rules and things you can and cannot do in the background of the time travel. And it would would close up holes. You wouldn't say, well, why can't they time travel here? Why can't they time travel there? If you've set up rules that limit the time traveling. Maybe, how did Beast time travel back, and how does he get people from the past? And can anyone do that? Or does he, have a key, and he's the only one who can use the time travel machine? And can the time travel machine only be used a limited amount? With Thor, I guess, there you could say, well, Thor is a magical, mythological creature, and he and Gore the God Killer were doing all kinds of time travel. But it still would help a lot if there were rules. I mean, why just have 3 Thors? Why not have 10 Thors from different times? Why not have 20, 100? If you posit that Thor can just easily time travel at any time, there should, even in a story with magic, there's like a magic well that would take you there, a gateway, a key, a talisman, something. Give us these things. Even in a total fantasy story, the ring in Lord of the Rings, it has all kinds of limitations and costs and prices. And the same could be said for, someone in the distance is playing some kind of flute. The same could be said for space travel in comics. Lots of comics do space travel. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking of all the Green Lantern comics seem to have endless space travel. Most recently I was reading Red Lanterns, and they just go from one star system to the other, like, it appears they fly for 15 minutes or a half hour and then they get there. And, in the real world we're talking billions, if not trillions of miles. If you could travel at the speed of light, it would take you years to cross those distances. Same thing for Iron Man in his current adventures. He can seemingly go anywhere at any time. I'm not even sure if he's using a spaceship or just his armor. Surely there could be a mechanism how he does that he creates a wormhole or a gateway, or there's a series of gateways, or has a warp drive, a hyperdrive. I mean, even very basic things like Star Trek and Star Wars, they have these drives, and sometimes they break down, sometimes they don't work, or there's a danger to it, or limitations. And limitations and dangers actually would help comics in their plots with science fiction. So that's kind of my little... I'm really happy with the science fiction comics and that it's so frequently used. But I think if it were reined in a little bit in some of these things, maybe it's mostly superhero comics, but it seems like even in other comics they use magic, science fiction, a little bit too much as magic, and a magic without any rules. Because it's all, as far as we are currently concerned right now, impossible. But if you give things rules and mechanisms and rationales, they feel more real and they make better stories. At least that's my opinion. I think what we get is kind of a collision of more sophisticated science fiction stories and this tradition of childish science fiction, particularly from the Silver Age kind of DC type of thing, where Superman can do anything, and super science is just anything the writer can think of at the moment that he needs to have happen. So something like this breaks the rules of physics, but in a way that makes you believe that it's happening. And in Prophet, there is travel between planets and worlds and solar systems, but it does take time, and there is, time dilation and passage of time. And somewhere in Prophet, they invented this kind of cool thing where they've kind of strung together worlds so that for a long period the hero is going from world to world, but they're all sort of encased in air, I think, and it's some kind of artificially put together sort of long boulevard of planets and planetoids, and that's really cool. There's all kinds of ways, while playing within kind of a super science background, that you can make things really cool. Anyway, that's my vlog for today, or my vlog for yesterday, or for Thursday. Thursday I didn't make a vlog. I had zero time in my life. Yesterday I made a vlog on this same subject while driving home in my car, and I did post it, and then I watched it, and I really didn't like it very much. So I made it unlisted after about 10 people watched it. So if you're one of the 10 people who saw it and now you're hearing a different version of the same vlog, thanks for watching twice. And I'll try to make another vlog tonight. I'm still aiming to do 31 vlogs. Obviously, I'm not literally going to make one every day, because there are days where it just doesn't work, or occasionally a vlog that I just can't stand to listen to, so I take it down. Hope you're all well, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.